Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kiddushin daf Nun Gimel. We are at the bottom, near the bottom of Nun Bet and Bet. Let me share my screen and we will get started. So yesterday we learned a Mishnah that had three parts. In part one said, if a man uses his share of Kodshe Kodshim, or which are edible only by Kohanim. That's the piece part of the sacrifice, various sacrifices or other kinds of offerings that portion goes to the Kohanim, or Kachim Kalim, which could go to even lay people, non-Kohanim. So then she is not married. Then we said if a man uses meiser, and we explained that basically this is not the property doesn't belong to the Kohen. It's really the gods, and God is enabling us to eat it. But it's not necessarily ours, and therefore we don't have the right to sort of give it away and make money off of it. And then second, if a man uses Meiser Sheni, we said Rebbe Meir says he's not married, whether it's done knowingly or unknowingly, meaning that on some level it doesn't actually belong to the person, just like Kudshim. But Rabbi Yehuda says if it's done knowingly, then the man is married. If it's done unknowingly, he's not married. We're going to see at some point today the explanation for both of those views. And then if a man uses Hektish, Rabbi Meir says if it's done knowingly, he's married her, but unknowingly, he's not married her. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's the other way around. If it's done knowingly, if the person knows that he's got Hektish, well, then he's not married. But if he does it not knowingly, then he has married her. And so we're going to explain that as well by the end of today, or at least be in the middle of those explanations by the end of today. So we pick up near the end of the fourth line from the bottom on Nun Bet Amud Bet, and we say, Tanya, and we had just said, the Gemara quotes a Baraisa that there is actually a debate regarding rule number one. So rule number one was that no matter what, Kudshim, and Kudshim Kalim, she's not married. Now we're going to hear that there's actually a different viewpoint. Because Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mikudeshes, Rabbi Yossi Omer Eino Mikudeshes. Rabbi Yehuda says in that situation, she is actually married. And we saw yesterday the story of Rabbi Yehuda being upset with his students, allowing the students of Rabbi Meir to come into his Beit Midrash, and he was upset that the student of Rabbi Meir, Sumchus, had taught the law that says that if a woman is that if a woman is proposed to, or there's an attempt to marry a woman with Kudshim, that in fact she is not married. And he was like, how could she even be there? And the point being that, again, suggesting that Rabbi Yehuda disagreed, and now we hear that in fact Rabbi Yehuda does disagree. But Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shneim Mikra Echad Darshu. And Rabbi Yochanan says, and they actually both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, derived their lesson from the pasuk in Bamidbar, that this will be yours from Kodesh Kodshim in the fire, from the fire. So Rabbi Yehuda savar lecha ulechol tzarachecha. That Rabbi Yehuda says, well, it says this is going to be for you, so it means it's going to be yours. You're going to do whatever you want with it, and that means that if you try to marry somebody, you are going to be married, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda says you're married. But Rabbi Yossi savar keish. Rabbi Yossi says no, it's not a valid marriage. And indeed, Rashi says with respect to Rabbi Yehuda's statement, "L'chol tzarachecha," last line of Rashi on Bedam Abed, "Va'afilu kadosh bo'esha." Even to marry a woman, you're able to do whatever you want with it. Rabbi Yossi savar keish. No, Rabbi Yossi says no. It's not yours for all purposes. It's like the fire, because what did we say in the pasuk? Again, the pasuk said, "Min ha'esh." So just like the fire does something, so too when we say lecha, it's limited in that way. Ma'esh la'achila, avhu nami la'achila. So just as the fire is for consumption, meaning it's going to burn something up and it won't be in existence any longer, so too, when we say that the korban is yours, it's for consumption and not for any other use. And so as a result, you won't be able to do it for anything else. So, and so let me just see 1 second. And yeah, and let's take a look in the last Rashi. Ke'esh chalku shel Aaron, the portion that goes to Aaron the Kohen, hushvu lechelko shel mizbeach, has become equated in this pasuk to the portion that goes on the altar. Ma mizbeach la'achila, just as the portion for the altar is to be eaten. Av Kohen la'achila, also the portion that goes to the Kohen is for food. Below davar acher, and not for any other purpose, and especially not in order to marry somebody. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now Rabbi Yochanan teaches an important point with respect to this statement. So let's take a look and see what it says. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, as we turn to Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, so Nimnu v'Gamru, they counted and they concluded. And they finished. What did that mean? So take a look in Rashi. Numnu v'gamru leminyan. They counted to see what the numbers would be. V'rabu, and most of them ha'omrim eina mikudeshes. Most of them said that she's not married. Ubitlu hamuatim v'chazru bahem. And so as a result, the minority position sort of retracted their point. The Gumru, and they concluded Lomar eina mikudeshes. And so everybody in the end agree that she's not married. All right. So Hamakadish Bechelko, Bain Kachim Kachim, Bain Kachim Kalam, Lo Kiddush. That if somebody tries to use their portion of Kachim Kachim or Kachim Kalam, where the person is not going to be married. Rav Amar Adayan Hi Machlokas. But Rav says, no, it's still a machlokas. They did not, in fact. Rabbi Yehuda may have heard the opinion, and we may conclude and actually hold like the majority opinion that says that it doesn't work, but that doesn't mean that Rabbi Yehuda retracted his original position. Amar Abaye, Kvase de Rabbi Yochanan Mistabre. It makes more sense to say, in Abaye's opinion, that Rabbi Yehuda did in fact change his mind. Tanya, Minayin she'ein chok and menachos keneged zvachim. How do I know that we can't? So this is going to be a long brisa. And that will, but the point of the brisa is that we're not going to allow any kind of exchanges of kudshim, and so as a result, we're going to see that is an opinion that if in fact Rabbi Yehuda says that you're allowed to marry with kudshim kalam or kudshim, well then you should be able to make such an exchange. So minayin she'ein chokin l'menachos keneged zvachim. How do I know that you can't exchange flour offerings for slaughtered offerings? Talmud lomer v'chol mincha asher te'afeh b'tanur. That when it specifically references the mincha that you bake in the oven. So l'kol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, that should be to all of Aaron's sons. Meaning you can't go ahead and trade it. It's got to be all of it's got to be go to Aaron's sons. You're not allowed to sort of make exchanges. Well, maybe the reason is that menachos are flat. Okay, that's fine. You can go there. Flat. Yeah. We're going to talk about it maybe later. Okay, Mark, because we're in the middle of the class now. Okay, so the mincha offering, maybe that you are allowed to trade with other kinds of offerings because it's part of the range of offerings that a poor person may be able to bring. That there are certain offerings that you are allowed to substitute, the korban olav yored, where depending on the wealth of the person who is bringing the korban, that determines which korban they make. But an animal korban is not in that list. And so shelo kamutaktem bedal, so that there's no substitution. So maybe that's why you can't make those exchanges. But you would be able to exchange a bird for a bird offering for a mincha offering. Share kamutaktem bedal, because those do substitute when it comes to poor the offerings of poor people in certain situations. So Talmud Lomer v'chol na'asa b'mar cheshes. V'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. That the emphasis on kol is to tell us that in fact it's got to be all of them. So you can't do any kind of exchanges. So yachol yachol kumenachos keneged ovos shahalalu mine damim v'halalu mine k'machim. Maybe what's the difference and why you can't do those across birds and flower is because the flower doesn't have any blood, meaning there's no sacrifice aspect to it. There's no a slaughtering aspect to it. But aval yachloku ovos keneged zvachim shahalalu v'halalu mine damim. Maybe you could do birds versus animals because they're both got blood in it. Tamalomar ba'al machavas. No, the additional wording of al machavas tells us that we're not allowed to make that substitution either. Yacholo yachloku yovos keneged zvachim shalalu ma'aseim biyad v'halalu ma'aseim bichli. That when it comes to slaughtering the birds, you do it with your finger. That's kamitza. You do it with the fingernail. That's a special kind of sacrifice, slaughtering that's done only in the Beit HaMikdash and only for birds. Whereas when it comes to an animal, you use a special knife and you do which is a utensil. So maybe you don't. Maybe that's why you don't do birds and animals. But maybe we should allow different kinds of offerings within themselves to be substituted. When it comes to mincha, you everything is with your hand. Tamalomar mincha b'nei yaron. No, it's everything. The specifically referencing the mixing with oil is again highlighting that there's no possible substitution even across similar offerings. Maybe it's different kinds of pans that we're talking about, and that only if you use a different kind of pan, it would not be permitted. But if you use the same kind of pan, so again, a deeper pan versus a shallower pan. Rakim kashim, because the deeper pan obviously is going to have a softer texture because it's going to be more cake-like, whereas the thinner pan is going to be more fried and crispy. And so as a result, maybe that should be the difference. So we should be able to do substitutions within the kinds of pans that we're talking about, because both of them are of the same consistency. Either they're hard or they're soft. Talmud Lomar, v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aharon tiyeh. Right? The point is that by adding additional details, the pasuk is making clear that all of the substitutions are prohibited. So maybe you might say that you can't substitute among kodshim kodshim, which is what we've been talking about so far, but maybe you could substitute about kodshim kalim. So Talmud Lomar ish ke'achiv v'samich lei im al toda. That near one it says every man gets the same thing, and this is in Vayikra Parak Zayin, and then nearby it talks about the Todah, which is a kodshim kalim. So kashem she'ein cholkim b'kodshim kodshim, just as we don't allow the exchanges to be made with respect to the holiest sacrifices, kach ein kolchim b'kodshim kalim. We're also not going to allow with a slightly less holy sacrifices of kodshim kalim. So ish cholek afilu balmum. And one more point is that now this is not relevant to our discussion, but a man but it's a continuation of the brisa that every man gets to share, meaning even a Kohen who has some kind of blemish in him. So even if he can't actually do the offerings, he's allowed to participate in the shares. And Ish also highlights that it's an adult, but not a minor. So a minor can't share even if he has no mum on him. Okay, so Stam Sifra Mani. Who is this teaching? This teaching is a halachic teaching regarding Vayikra. It's a sifra, and it's not a mishnah, so it's considered part of the sifra. And the anonymous teachings of the sifra are Rebbe Yehuda, V'hu Ka'amar Deleis Ba Din Chaluka Klal, and we said that there's no division associated with. You can't say, I'm going to take this korban and you take that korban. That's not allowed. So shmamina. So indeed, it seems like like Abaye has brought a very good proof that shows that you cannot allocate, and you cannot set, you cannot do a trade of one for another. Now, Tosos here asks, 1 second, in the Tosos, the Ka'amar Delesba Din Chaluka Klau, that you say that there's no kind of division at all. Perish She'ein Yachol, it's the third Tosos on the Gimel Amud Aleph. Perish She'einu Yachol Lito Mamon Acher Shel Chaveiro. So when we say cholek, to divide up, usually when you and I think of cholek, we're thinking about a pie and you get one piece and I get one piece and everybody else gets one piece. Well, but that is a different kind of chalukah. That is not the kind of dividing that we're talking about. Rather, the dividing that we're talking about is you get this sacrifice and I get the next sacrifice. And so when we say that you're not allowed to make the exchange, we're talking about that you're not allowed to exchange it effectively like it was money, so that you're doing some other piece in instead. As was explained in the Brisa. We should not understand this as meaning that you can't divide it up, meaning that all of it has to go to one Kohen. That even within the item, because we find we find in lots of places that a single item is divided among multiple kohanim. So Gabi Kachim, because it's not Parak Shoel, Matilin Chalashim, Vikachim, Parakama Dibsachim Nami Higiani Kaful. So again, in various situations, the context isn't really relevant, but the point is that we allow a division of a particular korban. The kaven delays but din chaluka. So now that we say that there's no rule of dividing, meaning that again I can't take this one and you take the other one. So similarly, ein yachol l'kadosh bo isha, you would not be allowed to use it to marry a woman. Daha baha talia, because these two issues are tied together. And so that shows that again, Rabbi Yehuda, who would be the author of this teaching, would say that in fact you don't need to. That you cannot use kachim to marry. And that's true, even though we had the brisa that said that Rabbi Yehuda said you could use kachim to marry. So it's clear then that this is a retraction of his original position, which is exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said had happened. Okay, so now that Abaye has raised that, as is naturally the case, Rava comes and disagrees and says, 1 second, maybe we could ask a question. Maybe we could find a case that shows that there's a brisa that is inconsistent with Rebbe Yehuda having retracted, and suggests that Rebbe Yehuda continued his dispute. But because Amarava, Ucharav mi lo Tanya, well, 1 second, maybe we have a position, a brisa that's consistent with Rav's position, that Rebbe Yehuda did not retract his position, and that Rebbe Yehuda would continue to say that you can marry using kachim. And here's the brisa, V'hatanya, Hatzinuim moshkim es yedehem. So what is this talking about? We'll just first translate it. So those who are tsanua, those who are less obnoxious, the more modest ones, they withdrew their hand. They pulled their hand back, and Rashi says, let's find it. This is Rashi. Top of the widest lines in Rashi, first of the narrow top lines in Rashi. So Gabi Lechem Hapanim, when it comes to this is a statement with respect to the Lechem Hapanim. The Lechem Hapanim are the showbreads that they were piled up in and left out all week. and then after the week is over, they are miraculously still fresh and even piping hot, and they get divided among the Kohanim. And Tanya, we have a brisa, Arba'im Shana Shishimish Shimon HaTzadik, during the 40 years that Shimon HaTzadik was the Kohen Gadol, Nishtalcha Bracha Belechem upon him. There was a blessing on the showbread. The Kol Kohen Hamigiyo Kizayas, and every Kohen who was able to get an olive size, Yesh Ochel V'Saveya, Yesh Ochel Mosir. He would eat and be satisfied, and he would eat and actually leave over, even though all he got. Can you imagine this, Mark? Imagine just getting a piece of bread this size, right? The size of an olive. And not only does that fill you up, but it fills you up so much that you leave over from the small size. That's the miracle of the showbreads during the time of Shimon HaTzadik. Mikan be'elech, however, from that point on, nishtalcha ma'ara belechem hapanim v'kol kohen amigio kaful hatzenuin moshkin yedayim. But then when after that point, it was not as blessed, and as a result, some Kohanim would try and take double, and those who were more modest, less gluttonous, so they would withdraw their hands and not mimenu and not take anything. Delo mahani lahu midi, because it wouldn't help anything. Vahagar garinan cholkin, and because why take? They're not going to be satisfied. And the Brisa is going to say, as we take the next words of the Brisa in Rashi, that those who were gluttonous, they would divide it. The kasalka daitach, and at the moment we're going to assume the high cholkin lavli tochelko hamagio. We're not talking about just taking some portion that he comes to him. Ka'amar kevan denishtalcha bo meira kafol lamai chazi ela cholkin derech ilui miniach chalkao v'chavero b'noto kenegdo b'makom acher. No, the point is that maybe when we say divide, we mean that dividing across weeks or across offerings, so that I'll take a little bit extra of the bread offering and you take a little bit extra of some other sacrifice. So, and what does that show? Alma isbahu din chaluka. And so we see that there must be a law that allows that kind of division. And that must be Rabbi Yehuda de Amar Mamonohu, because he's the one who says that we treat the sacrifice as if it was the money of the Kohen. Okay, and now umashani laolam ein bo din tichlika. And in the end, we're going to answer that really the kind of chalukah that we're talking about, there is no allowance. That you're not allowed to divide it across items. My cholkin, when we say that they divided, cholku hamagio, it's just within this particular piece, kamar. The kishaeno shave lo chotev chelik kavero, and when it's because it's not enough, he's going to grab a piece from his friend, v'ochlo, and then he's going to eat it. V'hatatanam b'mesech sukkah hanichnasim cholkim b'tzafon cholku hamagio. And similarly, when we say in Sukkah that the people who come in are from the north are going to divide, it's talking about the dividing within the item itself. Ka'amar u'ba'od shahaisa bo bracha, and that was talking about when the bread still had a bracha, and so you would take just a small piece within the overall thing. It wasn't talking about trading among different items. And so let's take a look now inside. So again, Hatzanuin Moshkenes Yadehem. This is on the Tzanuim is the fourth of the widest lines in the Gemara, the last word on the line. That those who are more civilized or more modest, they would withdraw their hands. Gargaranim Chokim, and the gluttons would divide it. So my cholkin, so the Gemara answers, as Rashi explained, chotfin, it means that they would take it. Kedagatani Seifa, as is emphasized at the end of the brisa. One Kohen took his portion and somebody else's portion. V'hayu Koronoto ben Chamsan ad yomoto, and they called him ben Chamsan until he died, meaning he was a glutton. Now Tosos asks a very interesting question, right? Because what did we just say before? We said that the Hagar Gerin Chokin, that the gluttons would take it, meaning that gluttons are taking extra. So we have this guy who's a glutton and is taking extra, and he gets called a name, and everybody else is a glutton and he doesn't get called a name. So, and they don't get called names. So my Chokin Chotvin, this is the fourth Tosos on Nun Gimel Amid Al, Kilomer Laolam Ein Bo Din Chaluka. So again, bottom line is that there's no division associated. Hi Chokin Chelku Hamagio. And again, we're talking about only the division of the item itself. Kamar. Because she'eno magilo ki im ma'at chotiv chelak kabero va'ochlo. And so he takes not only the little bit that he's supposed to get, he gets also the portion from his friend. Just like we say at the end, where somebody's taking the portion from the other person. The im tomar, 1 second, kevin shedarkan lechtov. Why did this guy get called a chamsan more than anybody else? So Tosas offers one answer: that he didn't just take the pieces that were from the people who withdrew their hand, the modest people who didn't want to just take a small piece that they wouldn't be satisfied with. He took also from other people who wanted. So abal ha'acherim, but when it came to the other people, lo hayuchotven elamechelek hatzenuin kishemoshkin yedehem. So Kohen number one, he was a big pig. And so let's be relative, right? So first we have 5 Kohanim that are grabbing at this thing. 2 of them say, you know what, I don't really need. I'm getting such a small piece, it's not worth it to me. So 2 of the Kohanim are willing to just take their piece and the portion that begins to belong to the 2 Kohanim that are more modest and are withdrawing their hands without taking anything. But then we've got guy number 5. Guy number 5 doesn't just want his piece, and he's not willing to just only take a piece of one of the people that withdrew their hand, but he's actually taking so much that he's taking away from the 2 other people who would have been satisfied with the piece of with the little piece, the extra little piece that they got when numbers 1 and 2 withdrew without taking anything. And so that makes him the one that they call the chamsan, and we're going to explain that term in a moment. But the bottom line is that another way to understand this, or another thought that I had with respect to it, is that the point is that we can also say that in fact, I realize it did not scroll. Here we go. That there's also a concept of relativism, meaning even if in fact we say that all of the gluttons took something, when you have somebody who's more gluttonous than everybody else, so then they're likely to get a reputation. And so that's the situation here. So now, why did they call him Chamsan? So let's take a look. So Amar Rabba Bar Rav Shela, my Kra'ah, what's the pasuk? Meaning, how did you get this term of a Chamsan, of a Ben Chamsan being called somebody who's like a, now literally means the son of an extortionist. So why is this person considered like an extortionist? Because when you take somebody from something else, it's considered like extortion. So Lokai Palatani miyad Russia mikapim avel v'chometz. That in the pasuk in Tehillim, Parak Ayin Aleph, pasuk Dalid, says that people, that one who takes people's possessions with force, right, is somebody who we're going to call a chometz, is somebody who's, and therefore we get from there to a chamsan. And Rabba Amar Mehach, Rabba says, no, it's not the pasuk in Tehillim, but it's a pasuk in Yeshaya, where it says, Lamdu hetev dirshu mishpat v'ashru chamotz, that learn to be kind, seek justice, and make better off the victim of theft. So as a result, a chamotz is somebody who's been victimized, and so as a result, a chamsan is the victimizer. So as a result, that's how we get to this term. Okay, so that has given us the background, and the bottom line from this Gemara is that Abaye's proof and our Mishnah seem to be the conclusion of our Gemara and are consistent with the idea that Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind and retracted and went and agreed with everybody else that in fact you cannot use kodshim to marry a woman. Okay, so now we go to lesson number 2 of our Mishnah. And our lesson number 2 of our Mishnah, again, scroll up to the top of the page so that we can see the machlokes. Rabbi Meir says that when you use Meiser Sheni, you're not married no matter what, whether you use it b'shogeg or b'mezid. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, look, if you use it b'shogeg, so then you're married. But if you do it b'mezid, if you do it b'mezid, then you're married because you're obviously intending to do it. But if you do it b'shogeg, then you're not married. Now we have to explain that, and we're going to see that that's going to be a question that we're going to leave even after this little bit of the Gemara. But let's take a look as we continue in the Gemara. So Maaser Sheni ben b'shogeg ben b'mezid lo kiddush divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer shogeg lo kiddush mezid kiddush. So again, that was the teaching that we just said. So how do I know this? And we're specifically focused now on Rav Meir's ruling. So Rav Acha brei de Rava mishmei de Gemara. So Rav Acha says, the son of Rava says in the name of the Gemara, and here the name of the Gemara means that it was taught in earlier generations. V'chol ma'aser haaretz mizera haaretz mipri ha'etz laHashem hu kodesh laHashem. That every tithe of the land from the grain of the earth or from the fruit of the tree is to Hashem, holy to Hashem. So this is a referring to Meiser Sheni. And so we see that it's La Hashem hu below Kadesh Bo'isha. You can use it, it's for Hashem, and it's not for a person's property. Well, one second, Hare Truma Maaser, Truma's Meiser, when it comes to the Truma that the Levi has to take off from the portion that the Levi gets, which he has to take off 1/10 of his 10% that he gets, and he has to give that to the Kohanim. So it says, Kain Tarimu Gamatem, Diksiv Kain Tarimu Gamatem, Trumas Hashem, that you need to take Truma, and it says Trumas Hashem. That suggests that it belongs to Hashem also. Utanan Hamakadesh Betrumaos Mukudeshes. And yet we say that a Kohen who marries with Truma is married because Deloksiv Be La Hashem. It has to say La Hashem. It's not enough to just say Hashem. It's got to say to Hashem. Well, one second. Bahare Chala. What about Chala? Diksiv Ba Titnu La Hashem. That it has to be given to Hashem. Utnan Hamakadesh Betrumos Mikudeshes, and we say that if one marries with Trumos, and Rashi explains that Kol Trumos B'mashma, third to last line of Rashi on the bottom of the page, Kol Trumos B'mashma, that all kinds of Trumos are included in this phrase of marrying with Trumos and being a legal marriage method. V'chala Nami Trumahi. And chala is a type of truma. Diksiv mireshis ariso sechem. In Sefer Bamidbar Perek Tesvav, it says that from the first of your does, titnu Hashem truma, you should give to Hashem as an offering, as a truma. So delo ksiv be kodesh. No, well there it doesn't say kodesh. It might say la Hashem, but it doesn't say kodesh. Well, in second, v'arei shvius diksiv ba Yovel hu kodesh to yelachem. There it says kodesh. Utnana makadesh beferes shvius mukadesh. We saw in our own Mishnah that if you marry with shvius, you're married. So how could you say that kodesh is the key word? No, deloksi be la Hashem. It's got to have la Hashem also. V'harei truma. Well, second, it says kodesh Yisrael la Hashem reishis tuasa. But when it comes to truma, it says that it's kodesh la Hashem. Now, this pasuk is actually not in the Torah; it's in Yirmiyahu. But the bottom line is, we see a pasuk that refers to truma as kodesh and la Hashem. So utnan hamakadesh betrumos mikudeshes, and we say that one can marry with trumos. Well, no, hahu b'Yisrael ksiv. No, the point is, it says kodesh Yisrael, that the Jewish people are kodesh to Hashem, just like truma. But one second, v'lav memela shamat minei. But one second, that verse, although it literally is saying that the Jewish people are holy, is analogizing the Jewish people that are holy to Hashem to truma. So that by analogy shows that truma is also holy to Hashem. So Targuma Ravin Sava Kamei Derav. So Ravin, the elder, he explained it in front of Rav as follows. It's not, we have to change the answer completely. Amar Kra, who? That the pasuk, again, the pasuk that we cited at the very beginning, right? The pasuk that says, "V'chol ma'aser ha'aretz mizer ha'aretz mipriya eitz la'Hashem," who kodesh la'Hashem. That who teaches us b'habayaso yehe, that it has to be what it is, meaning that it cannot be used for anything other than being for Hashem. And all the other psukim do not have that phraseology, and therefore that is, in fact, our answer. So we have now explained, according to Rebbe Meir, why it doesn't make a difference whether you use Meiser Sheni on purpose or by accident, etc. You've used Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni, a pasuk says you can't use it, and therefore that doesn't work. Now, we haven't answered how it is that Rebbe Yehuda allows you to use it when it is not, when it's not, when you do so knowingly. So we haven't answered that, and we still need to do that. So we're going to try and do that, and we're going to do that by looking at the final piece of our Mishnah and noticing something else. Now, let me just note a law with respect to Me'ilah. Me'ilah is the idea that if I dedicate something to the Beit HaMikdash, then if I use it by accident, I have engaged in Me'ilah. The item that I use loses its sanctification, and I am going to be obligated to bring a special korban for the action that I did. I didn't do it on purpose. So, there's God's understanding, but even when we don't do things on purpose, it's the classic line when children say, I didn't do it on purpose. Yeah, but we hold people responsible even if you don't do things on purpose. We expect a significant level of care. And so it's important to understand that in general, the main opinion in respect to Me'ilah is that if you do it on purpose, it's not Me'ilah. It's something else. You did something wrong. You should not use the item that has already been dedicated to the Beit HaMikdash on purpose. But that item remains holy, and you are not you don't owe that korban. You have to do other tshuva, but you're not going to owe that korban. On the other hand, we're going to see that Rebbe Meir will actually say that even if you do it knowingly, then you also, maybe it becomes deconsecrated, the item, and through the misappropriation. Now that we've sort of given that as the background, let's look at the two opinions, right? So we had the two opinions. I'm going to scroll back up to the top here. We had the two opinions with respect to Hektish. And let's do Rebbe Yehuda first, because it's going to be the one that makes more sense. Rebbe Yehuda says that if you use something from Hektish knowingly, you have not married. That makes perfect sense, because, again, he says, and if you use it by accident, if you use it unknowingly, you have married. Now, again, that's going to make perfect sense, because if you do Me'ilah, then we say that the item that you did Me'ilah with, that money is now no longer considered holy. And so as a result, since it's no longer considered holy, we can give it to you, and because you've taken possession of it, and we can say that if you now marry a woman with it, it is a valid marriage because you did Me'ilah. You didn't realize what you were doing. And so nobody knew what was going on. And so it's going to be okay. But when it comes to doing it on purpose, if you went to the Beis HaMikdash and went and took the money from Hektish and said, oh, I'm going to use this to marry somebody, that money retains its holiness. And so even though you've now moved it somewhere else and you've given it to the woman, it never was yours. It never belonged to you. And so as a result, Rebbe Yehuda's position totally makes sense. If you do it knowingly, you've done nothing because it still belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. If you do it accidentally, if you do it unknowingly, then you have done something because you've done what is called Me'ilah. You have made the money unconsecrated, and now you've given it to the woman, and it belonged to you because you unconsecrated it. And so as a result, she's going to be married. However, Rebbe Meir's position doesn't make any sense, because Rebbe Meir, even if we say that when you act intentionally, it is also going to cause a deconsecration. But so that piece might make sense according to Rebbe Meir, because Rebbe Meir says that if you do it knowingly, you've married her. So fine, if you do it knowingly, you've married her. But he says that if you do it unknowingly, you haven't married her. Is that strong? Exactly. It should be the reverse, as Rebbe Yehuda says. So that's where we are at the moment. Okay, so we're going to now that we have that background, we're ready to get into the details. Okay, so the Gemara.
That's not enough.
All right, so the uvehektish the mazid kiddush b'shogeg lo kiddush. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So again, Rabbi Meir is the one that's got the confusing position, because he says if you do it on purpose, you were married. If you do it by accident, you're not. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'shogeg kiddush b'mezid lo kiddush. Rabbi Yehuda says if you did it by accident, you're married, but if you do it on purpose, you're not. So that makes much more sense. So Amar Rabbi Yaakov shamati mina de Rabbi Yochanan tarti. I learned two things from Rabbi Yochanan. Shigigas meiser de Rabbi Yehuda. It explains why the earlier case of Meiser Sheni, why Rabbi Yehuda says that it's not considered a valid marriage, and Shigigas Hektish to Rabbi Meir, and why, according to Rabbi Meir, when you use Hektish by accident, you're not married. Shneyan in miskadeshes behen. In both cases, the woman's not married. Okay, so why is it? Chada lefi she'ein isha rotza. In one case, it's because the woman doesn't want. And in one case, it's because both of them don't want. And I don't know why each one is the way it is. Meaning, I don't know whether the reason that the one where the woman's upset and not the man is by Meiser Sheni, and I don't, or maybe that's the one that's by Hektish, and I don't know whether they're both upset, whether that's by Meiser Sheni or that's by Hektish. I'm just not sure, because I don't remember what Rabbi Yochanan said, and I hope that makes all of us feel better that sometimes we don't remember the things that we learn. So Rabbi Yirmiyah nechse anan Meiser. It seems to me the following: that Meiser, when it comes to Meiser, ihi lo nichala, she's not going to want it. Because Mishum Tircha de Orcha, she's going to be forced now to travel up to Yerushalayim with this property that she just got. But Ihu Nicholai did Nichne Itza Mela, that he was able to effectively acquire himself a wife through this Meiser Sheni, which outside of Yerushalayim really isn't worth anything. But Ella Hektish. But when it comes to Hektish, Tarvaihu Lo Nicholahu de Nitchil Hektish al Yadaihu. But for when it comes to Hektish, both of them are going to be upset, because neither of them are going to want that their marriage is going to cause the deconsecration of Hektish, which, as Rashi points out, is an Aveira. So that's something that's prohibited. So neither of them are going to want that to, in fact, be the case. So, but Rabbi Yaakov says back, no. Yes, I understand your point, Rabbi Yirmiyah, but I'm going to give you the argument in the other direction. And that's why I'm uncertain about it. Because Rabbi Yaakov Amar, Ibcha Mistabra, the other way also makes a lot of sense. Because Milo Ikala Meimar, Maser, Ihilo Nichala, Mishum Tircha de Orcha, right? Again, when it comes to Meiser, she's going to be upset because of the work that she needs to do. And Ihu, he's going to be upset, Lo Nichale, Mishum Onsa de Orcha. He has going to be responsible for something if something happens along the way. Now, Rashi here offers two understandings of this. One is that if something happens along the way, he's going to need to replace his Meiser Sheni, and he has to do an alternative. The second explanation of Rashi is no, he doesn't have to replace the Meiser Sheni, but the bottom line is he's going to be married to somebody who is going to be very upset that the gift that was given to her, she never got to benefit from. So the whole thing was totally useless. And now she's married to the guy, and he gave her something that was totally useless. Not a great way to start off a relationship. You want to begin a relationship on a sound foundation and not based on something that is meaningless. So therefore, maybe in fact, both of them would prefer, if they knew that it was Meiser Sheni, both of them would be upset about it. Ella Hektish, but when it comes to Hektish, Bishlama Ihi Lo Nichala de Nitchil Hektish Al Yada, because she's going to be upset that as a result, Hektish became deconsecrated through her. But Ella Ihu, Milo Nichale de Nikne Itzab Mela, maybe he's going to be happy that he married somebody as a result. and that even though he did a sin, maybe he's going to be happy enough with that. So the bottom line is that we have explanation number one for our situation. Explanation number one is that the bottom line is that when we're dealing with these shogeg situations, the people wouldn't have wanted to be involved. And so as a result, even though maybe you might ordinarily say, hey, when it comes to Rebbe Yehuda with respect to Meiser Sheni, where he doesn't have a drasha that says that you're not allowed to use it, so you're allowed to use it, whether you use it accidentally or on purpose. But no, when you use it accidentally, the woman never had a chance to say it would be okay with her. And so as a result, that's why it doesn't work. And then when it comes to Rebbe Meir says, if you use the hektish intentionally, so again, Rebbe Meir is the one who says that when you use hektish intentionally, it's considered me'ilah, and so you've deconsecrated it, and so you've given it to her. And she knows that it's been given to her, and she's okay with it. So again, that's totally fine. But when you do it by accident, then neither of them knew that it was then at least one of them didn't know that you were going to do a sin with the item, and so as a result doesn't want to be involved. So that's explanation number one for our situation. Now we're going to offer explanation number two, but only for Rebbe Meir's piece, not for Rebbe Yehuda. Rebbe Yehuda we've explained, and now we're going to Rebbe Meir. Rava mirav chista. Isha ein miskadeshes. A woman, we know, is not married if they accidentally use hektish, according to Rebbe Meir, as explained by Rashi. Amarle Rav Chista. So most mahu sheyatzu l'chulin. What about if she uses money in order to is the money deconsecrated as a result of her doing of this happening? So Amarle Isha ein miskadeshas most heich yatzu l'chulin. If the woman isn't married, then what use has the money performed? Meaning, in order to do me'ilah, you need to take something that is for hektish and use it. But here, the money hasn't actually been used because the woman isn't married. And so as a result, maybe we could say that in fact there is no marriage, and as there is no me'ilah. And so as a result, according to Rebbe Meir, when it's done accidentally, maybe it's not about the intention and the willingness to participate. Maybe it's about that it's never become deconsecrated and it's never become his. So by mina Rav Chia bar Avin mirav chista b'mechar mai. What about a sale? If you're telling me that if a transfer of my money, so again, we have money of the Beis Hamikdash that's piled up over here, and I take that money and I give it to a woman to try and marry her, all I've done is move the pile of money. I have not actually deconsecrated it because I haven't actually done anything. So what about a sale? What if I take the money and I buy that, buy a pen from you? Is that considered a situation where we'll say it's it's me'ilah and it's deconsecrated? So the Rav Chista responds, no, af b'mechar lo kana. There's no transaction whatsoever. And so as a result, we now have a confirmation of explanation number two, that it's not about whether or not Rebbe Meir thinks that the woman wouldn't have wanted, or the man wouldn't have wanted, the idea of using a me'ilah and having a sin be the source of their marriage. It's about the fact that it isn't me'ilah in the first place when you just move it from one place to another. So Esvei, one second, we have a question, because we have the following story. And Rashi helps us out here, that if we have a Mishnah regarding me'ilah, where if you have the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash, the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash says that. So let me move it up. So the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash, has all the hektish money, and he leaves some money with somebody, and thinking that he left his own money, but in fact he accidentally took the money from the Beit Hamikdash. Now, that person that he leaves the money with uses the money. The question is who did the me'ilah? Was the me'ila done by the person who used the money, or was the me'ila done by the treasurer by giving the money of hektish to somebody else to use it? And it's important to remember that this is one of the few cases, me'ila is one of the few cases where if I ask you to go and take something from hektish by accident, I don't remember that it's hektish, and you go and do it, even though we usually say that an agent cannot perform a sin on behalf of somebody else, this is an exception to that situation. You can perform a sin on my behalf. And so the question is, when the treasurer leaves the money with somebody and the person now uses it, is it as if that person was the agent of the guy, and therefore the me'ila goes back to the treasurer? Or do we say, no, the person shouldn't have used the money that was left with him? So we're going to divide three cases. There's the case of a money changer. In a money changer case, if the money is all wrapped up, then we're going to say the money changer should not be using it because it's all wrapped up. If the money was not meant to be used. But if the money is loose, then everybody understands that a money changer needs money all the time. He's going to borrow the money and use it to make an exchange in order to do this money changing. And so as a result, the gizbar, the treasurer, should have known that, and he's going to be the one who's responsible for the me'ila. On the other hand, if the money changer goes and uses the money when it was all wrapped up, we're going to put the responsibility on him. On the other hand, what happens if I just go to the treasurer of the Beit HaMikdash just goes to some John Doe, some guy on the street, some homeowner, and says, listen, watch it for me. Well, in that case, we don't assume that anything is going to be used. And so whether the money is wrapped up or whether the money is loose, if the homeowner goes and takes the money and uses it, we're going to put the me'ila on him and not on the treasurer. Now, what about the middle case of a storekeeper? Do we say with respect to a storekeeper that he's like a money changer and therefore is going to use it if it's loose and be responsible if it and the treasurer will be responsible, but if he uses it when it's tied up, he's not. Then the storekeeper will be responsible, just like a money changer will be responsible? Or do we say, no, the storekeeper should be viewed like a homeowner and be totally responsible for using it under any circumstances? So that's the story. So Esve, we have the following Mishnah. Rabbi Meir says that a storekeeper is like a householder, meaning a homeowner, and therefore he's responsible no matter what happens if he uses it for Me'ila. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. No, a storekeeper is like a money changer, and so as a result, he's not going to be if the money is loose, then the treasurer is going to be the one that's responsible. So ad kan lo kamiflage. Well, 1 second, but the implication is that they're only disagreeing. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir are only disagreeing. Ela demar savar chenveni kishulchani, umar savar chenveni kival bias. That they only disagree about how to treat it. But everybody agrees about the kuli alma im hotzi mal. But everybody agrees that if the storekeeper uses the hektish money, then he's committed me'ila. But 1 second, we have been understanding Rebbe Meir, according to the most recent understanding of Rebbe Meir, as saying that me'ila requires consumption. It's not enough to just move the pile from one place to another. It's not enough to just use it to marry someone. It's not enough to just buy something with it. Those transactions don't constitute me'ila and don't constitute actual transactions because the money never belonged to the person and therefore there was no transaction associated with it. So Rabbi Meir, so now we answered no. In fact, we can keep our second explanation of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir lidvarav to Rabbi Yehuda Kamar. Rabbi Meir was trying to argue within the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Lididi, according to Rabbi Meir, he's saying im hotzi nami lo mal. Even if the storekeeper spends the money, he hasn't done me'ila because the money still exists. But el lididach, according to you, Odi Mia the Chenbeni Kivala bias, you should at least admit that the storekeeper should be like a homeowner, meaning that the Me'ila should happen no matter what. But Amar Le, lo. And Rabbi Yehuda says back, no, kish shulchani, he's like a shulchani. So we right now have one explanation for Rabbi Yehuda in connection with Meiser Sheni, that it's all about what the woman would have wanted, and possibly the man as well. And then we have explanation number two, and that affects both, and that explanation can work for both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. And now we have explanation number two for Rabbi Meir, which is that that there is no me'ilah if all you do is move the pile. And so as a result, if you're not acting intentionally, if you act intentionally, we're going to say that that's me'ilah according to Rabbi Meir. And even if you move the pile, you're going to have bin mo'el. But if all you're doing is moving the pile and you're acting accidentally, we're not going to treat that as me'ilah. Me'ilah would be if you have fruit of hektish and you were to eat the fruit. So then by accident, then you would do me'ilah. But if you just take the thing and move it from one place to another, we're not going to treat that as me'ilah. And therefore, that's why if you marry somebody with hektish intentionally, we're going to say that you married with hektish intentionally, and so as a result, you need to. It's a good marriage because you did an act of me'ilah, you took the item into your possession, and now you're married. But if you act by accident, well, then all you've done is move the item from one place to another. You have not taken it into your possession, and as a result, we're not going to treat you as married. So we've now explained all of that, but it's not so simple. Rav has a problem with this understanding of Rabbi Meir. And so to hear the problem that the Rav has with this explanation, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. Wish you a fabulous, fabulous day.
I was going to